Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Sandra Schnakenburg. She is a dual American Australian citizen. Sandy earned a BS in Finance and International Business at Arizona State University and an MBA specializing in Finance and Accounting at the University of Southern California. She left a career in corporate finance in 2010 to study creative nonfiction. She has completed writing courses at Rice University, Writespace, and the Writers University in Houston. When not writing, you will find Sandra enjoying her family, nature, hiking, skiing, biking, cooking, yoga, and walking her dogs. She and her husband, Karl, currently split their time between Houston, Texas, and Park City, Utah. Welcome to the show, Sandra.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you on the show. Well, I feel like you are so much more than this bio. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Well, most importantly, I'm a mother of two. I take pride in that. They're 29 now,
Okay.
my boy, girl, and they were born in Australia, so they're Australian citizens as well. And I raised them in Texas.
Okay.
We have two little dogs, Sophie and Winnie. I have my husband we've been married 33 years this year.
Wow.
And we lived in overseas for 10 years. And I left my job in corporate finance to write this story, as said in the bio, and it's been a long journey.
Yes.
I come from a family of six. I come from a big, big family, and they all have supported me in this endeavor as well.
Yeah. I was wondering as I was reading that, like what the response to your family was going to be. But before we get ahead of ourselves, why don't you tell the
Yeah,
listeners who might not have read The Housekeeper's Secret yet? Can you tell them a little bit about it?
absolutely. Well, today's the release day, December 3rd, and I'm
Congratulations.
thrilled that it's out in the world. It's just like a dream come true. Um, the, the story is really about a journey of love, resilience, and uncovered truths. And our beloved housekeeper, Lee, lived with us for 30 years, and she came when I was 3.5 years old. So she really was my second mother and the most wonderful person to our family. But the story isn't about how great she is. It's also about what she was concealing while she was this pillar of light in our family. Is when she was on her deathbed in 1994, after 30 years of being with our family, she asked me to write her story. A story that she always said, I'm going to write a book one day and nobody will ever believe it. And we were always like, what is this story? And I was a curious kid that always would pry, and she would just shut me down
Yeah.
immediately. But now here I am on her deathbed, and she's asking me to write this story, and I don't know her story at all. So what I do is I go on an investigative journey, and I uncovered this shocking, unimaginable past that she had, and it threw our whole family for a loop. And that's the premise of the book,
Yeah.
basically. How does somebody survive such a dark, traumatic past that is gut-wrenchingly hard to even like a Holocaust situation, and then come into a family with no past at all? In her view, she gave us a story, a fabricated story,
Yeah.
that she had a husband and son that were killed in a car accident, and don't ever ask her about it because she'll go into shock. So we basically that we were shut out,
Yeah.
and she came into our family as a light. And as a hero, almost like a heroism, was we had a very verbally abusive father. He was narcissistic, and he beat down my mom and sisters just like we were no good.
Wow.
But Lee, the housekeeper, always built us up and was the words of wisdom to keep us going.
Yeah. It's almost like she would have to close off that part of her heart, right? Of like, I can't even touch that part.
She actually, what I really found out without revealing any spoilers is that she came to our home to hide out, and she didn't want to be found, and she didn't want to be found out. And people were looking for her for years.
Wow.
They didn't know where she was. And so she was our sweet little humble housekeeper that was so amazingly such a light of
Yeah.
contentment and peace. But in reality, we were her safe haven, and she was hiding out in our 44-acre property in the middle of nowhere in Barrington.
Yeah. I love that for both sides though, right? Like you're saying, like she was a safe haven for your family too, right? It's like you just it's amazing, like the serendipity that goes behind that, that you found each other.
Yes, it was serendipitous. And I feel like it was a divine appointment because my mom was praying for a housekeeper that could be a part of the family. And she was a prayer woman too. God was very much a part of her life.
Yeah.
She always kept the St. Jude prayer in her pocket. And I never understood why St. Jude. Like I was
Sure.
very inquisitive child. I was like, that's the saint of hopeless cases.
Yeah.
I'm like, Lee, you're not a hopeless case. We're the hopeless case. I've always felt like our family's falling apart and you're here with your words of wisdom. Why are you praying to St. Jude? And she's like, oh, never mind, never mind. She'd always brush off everything.
Yeah.
That would, Mhm.
Yeah, kind of keep that compartmentalized, right? And that part of her
Yeah.
life private.
What was interesting, she always thought this was going to be a book, and she loved books and movies. It actually reads like a movie, but she saw it like that, and she didn't want to die without the hope of this story coming out. And she knew I would figure out the story because I'm one of those extremely curious and persistent people to get a lot of questions and go down these rabbit holes. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I
yeah,
love that it read very investigative like that. Like, it was definitely a page turner. I was like, okay, I want to know. I want to know what's going to happen. Like, what's she going to find? What are you
yeah,
going to uncover? And it was such a great read for that.
yeah, yeah.
So,
It's intriguing.
yeah, well, congratulations on this being your release day. That is so exciting.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, what have you learned about yourself through writing this book?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things I learned was never to give up. It's it really going through this process was agonizing
Yeah,
in many ways because wasn't a trained writer. I learned patience. I learned how to keep distractions away. I'm a little ADHD. I was in a automobile accident when I was younger, which Lee helped me through a lot, and I had a traumatic brain injury myself.
yeah,
And through the process of me healing, Lee saw that I had a lot of perseverance in my own life, but through the process of writing this book, it took perseverance, determination, and also an extreme amount of vulnerability for me to get real with the process of what happened in my family. Because I think in some ways we were so isolated, I was in denial
yeah,
of it's all we knew is this incredible father that was wealthy but he was verbally abusive.
yeah,
And we thought that was how all families were. Like
yeah,
just we know what was normal. We were isolated. This is before, computers and lots of television. I think we had like three or four stations. Um, it was it was really amazing, like how I also learned how to find peace and contentment, the same peace that Lee had. I've always wanted some of that.
yeah,
And I found that through meditation, yoga, and just centering myself and allowing spirit to flow through me, telling me this is what you got to do. This is where you got to take this. And then serendipitously, people came into my life to help me to the next level.
yeah.
I also learned one thing about writing is that there is a huge amount of it is a myth. Writer's block is a myth. It's just resistance to growth. And
Oh,
Stephen Pressfield talks about this in The War of Art. And I had so much resistance because I knew I was breaking through something real for myself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. I have to sit with that for a minute. That is what an amazing way of thinking about that. Because again, back to like we close off ourselves, right? It's like we don't want to open that trap door and see what's behind it, I think, a lot.
Well, we know that because that's what's going to help us grow
Yeah.
when we lean in to the difficult things.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to do is just keep leaning in instead of going, this is too hard, I can't do this. Because 97% of people want to write a book, don't finish,
Yeah.
or start a book that don't finish. 3% finish their book.
Wow. Wow.
So the statistic is very, very high that we put this aside because the resistance is so high. And I didn't want to be that statistic. I wanted to be the 3%.
Yeah. And I imagine with your personality, it sounds like you're very driven as well. So you're like, okay, you put
Yeah.
your mind to something, you're like, I'm gonna. But I imagine too, like your family supporting you on the backside of
Uh-huh.
it, that had to help as well.
That was huge. My family really saw this story as Lee's wish to be the story needed to be in the world. And I really just feel like I was the conduit between like God and Lee and and I was just used to write this story.
Yeah.
Like she's going to be able to bring it out. Let's give this to her. It was almost like I'm the in-between person. This is Lee's gift to the world, and this was meant to be in the world
Yeah.
by some higher spirit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a funny way to look at it, but I don't really get the credit. It's sort of like everything working together, family, and then those spirits on the other side.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at your journey, right, I think you can see God's design and plan for your life all along, right? We never know what that's going to be, but it just sounds like all of these things just lined up exactly how you need it. It's like he just kind of showed you that path and you just kept following.
I did. I kept listening. I think that's the key is when you're in alignment, you know it because things kind of fall in their pathway in a very serendipitous way. But when you're out of alignment, things don't work out
Hmm.
and they keep falling off the path and you keep wondering why is everything so hard? So I think that is something that I had to really get in alignment. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned in writing the book too, is stay true to myself
Yeah.
and true to God and true to the story, true to what I'm how God wants to use me.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, be open and be listening too.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's great. I imagine that for you and your family both, that as you started to uncover this about Lee,
Hmm.
that just there had to be a lot of reconciling between the Lee you knew and then everything that was her past.
Yes. So that's a really good observation because I thought it was just going to write Lee's story and I'm
Yeah.
a safe, keep my little background in a little box, and I was doing what Lee did,
Yeah.
right? But then I realized this is memoir is my truth, my my story, unraveling the truth of Lee's story and how I came back to who I am and how I healed through the
Yeah.
process. So I had to reconcile with a lot of the childhood things that happened. And the book starts and basically walks the reader through Lee arriving at our house. I was 3.5, almost 4, and then who she was in our family. So you can see the dynamic was breaking down,
Yeah.
and then who she was to get us through. And then later after my mom dies and we find her ashes, that's when I go on the investigative journey. And, the reader has walked through the story with me as a child, as an adult, as an investigative journalist.
Yeah. I think that really
Hmm.
drew me into the story was your story, right? Like that first day when she showed up, right, from like your child perspective, right? You did such a good job with writing that, but just seeing the what she gave to your mother too, like and so quickly, right? Like how quickly your mother was to feel at ease in her home and
Yes.
and you said like the lining up for the prayers and just praying that she would stay and praying that, and
Um,
finding her. That just really drew me in because I'm like, wow, this woman is special to this family.
yeah. 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 It was so interesting because, here we were, the family that looked like we had everything.
Mhm.
And here's Lee, who we find out, she was living in a homeless shelter coming to work for us. And she kept saying, I'm going back to my apartment. But she wouldn't commit to staying with us for 3 years.
Yeah.
It was every 2 weeks she'd go back to, she said, her apartment. until my mom did a little research and found out she was staying at the homeless shelter.
Yeah.
And that really shook us up. So we invited her to stay permanently, and she didn't answer us. It took a while for her to come to terms with, if I stay permanently, then I'm always going to be here. And she finally agreed. It was very hesitant. And here we were, so desperate for her.
Yeah.
We were like this hungry family wanting this wonderful person, this contentment. But we were told never to ask her about her past. There was this mystery about her. My mom knew it was there, but she just said, don't go there because we love Lee just the way she is.
Yeah.
She didn't want to rock any boats so that she wouldn't leave.
Yeah. And like spooker.
She said, yeah,
Yeah.
it would spook her. And she said, well, Sandy, if you keep asking her questions about her family or her past, she's going to leave. And I'm like, okay, I had to be quiet for a while. But I was so curious and
Yeah.
I was so close to Lee.
Yeah. And at a young age too, it's hard to you don't understand, that you should be filtering a little bit, right? It's like just anything that comes to mind, you say. Like, okay, well, yeah, I want to
Right.
know the answer to this burning question I have.
And I had a lot. I was like, we went to church every Sunday. I'm like, Lee was always like, I'm Catholic, I'm Catholic. I'm like, why don't you go to church with us?
Yeah.
We'd love that. And she's like, oh no, I went to church every single day of my childhood, and that's enough days for the rest of my life. I was like,
She paid her
does that
debt.
work? Is God counting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you hope that readers will ponder as they read The Housekeeper's Secret?
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the things that's come a takeaway for the book that I think readers will have is it's not what happens to you in life that matters, like the trauma, the suffering. I mean, people all have some sort of crisis or another.
Mhm.
We deal with things every day, but it's what we do with what happened to us. And although Lee's story is horrendous and tragic, she took it and she reinvented herself. She went to the very extreme in a day without technology where people don't have background checks or Google. And she became a person of light and love and peace and contentment for a family suffering from verbal abuse and suffering from emotional, like, with just no emotional, you know, love
Yeah.
there. There was just so much stress and fear, and we were walking on eggshells every day. But she was the words of wisdom. She was like, don't take a sick person's words for real.
Yeah.
You need to, find your strength inside yourself. And I do hope readers pull away from that and say, this is true. This is the most incredible, horrible thing. But yet this woman rose above it and became the better version of herself. But she had to reinvent herself. She created a new identity, a new name,
Yeah.
a new birth date. She created a whole new backstory. This that she had a husband and son that died in a tragic car accident.
Yeah.
That that wasn't true. For 30 years,
Yeah.
we believed that. All that was what I believed growing up. And it was just those pictures were on her mirror for 30 years.
Wow.
And we just wondered, she just covered it all up with this fabricated, she had to reinvent herself to get the job.
Yeah.
And it is amazing that this can't happen today with background checks and, all
Yeah,
the
you can
different,
like fly under the radar today.
you, you can't.
Yeah.
But she came to a desperate family that needed love and support and a helping hand. And she ended up being our teacher and mentor for so many things that, it's hard to even like. So I
Yeah.
do think we all have a light in us, like all people. And I think that it's not really what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you.
Yeah. Exactly. You're not going to let this moment define you. And I love that you say that. And I love this question because I'm trying to think about how to teach my kids to be resilient, right? Or like prepare them for the life and the road ahead for them because we know that a stress-free life is not a thing, right? Like there's going to be trials and
Yes.
tribulations along their path. And so I'm always trying to figure out like what do I need to teach my kids today so they'll be prepared for when that hard moment comes. And so I love that. It's like you don't have to let it define you.
Yeah. I also, as a parent, not to get offline, but as a parent, our kids have to go through stuff themselves. Like I'm
Mm.
realizing this they had to like I'm just trying to teach them everything, but they're like enough less, no more lessons learned. Like they have to go through it, and you have the hardest part about for me
Yeah.
being a parent now that they're older is that you have to watch them make the mistakes,
Yeah.
even though you know that they're mistake, you have to watch it because they have to learn from the mistakes like I learned from mine.
Yeah. Yeah, we might have
Hmm.
the wisdom on the other side of it, but they kind of have to go
Yes,
through it themselves. And you're right,
yes.
that's probably the greatest tool, right? Is for them to walk through it and like through experience, learn through experience. So,
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't wish anything bad on anybody, but what Leah went through was so horrible. But she ended up being such an incredible human being because of because of what she went through.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure she was wonderful before, but when you suffer, like that and actually rise above it and survive something great, you create meaning in life, you create purpose, and you create a reason to live,
Yeah.
which is and very impactful. I mean, there's people like Viktor Frankl talks about the Holocaust victims.
Yeah.
Some of them committed, they just took their life, couldn't take it. Viktor Frankl got everything stripped away from him. His wife and kids were all killed there. And then he came out and he wrote the book, The Meaning of Life. He
Yeah.
talks about this innate sense of purpose that we have to live. And that's that innate sense that Lee had to survive the unthinkable.
Yeah. I was actually editing an episode last night and I loved her. We're having a similar conversation, but she was talking about how it takes a grain of sand underneath the shell to make a pearl. And it just
Mm,
sometimes you need these
that's great.
difficult experiences to really test your character and figure out who you are. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And you hope that people are strong enough, like your children are strong enough to see that, to not fall into the darkness,
yeah,
but to take that and learn from it and do something with it.
yeah,
So there is both sides. You have to have strength of character
yeah,
and the
absolutely.
will. Mhm.
Well, I don't know if this is too soon to ask since it's release day, but after this experience of writing The Housekeeper's Secret, do you think you'll write something else?
I do have another book in me.
Okay,
Um, I'm not ready to share the premise yet because
sure.
it's pretty intense.
Yeah,
But I've been outlining it just off and on, between the process of, I've been wanting to stay in the excitement of the housekeeper's secret because I've lived with it so long. I
yeah,
really want to give it the best go, but I think in the cracks of my quiet time, I do think about this other story and I build the plot and I get the arc and I have my characters going. And it is a nonfiction, but I think I'm going to write it as fiction.
okay. Awesome. Well, yeah,
I think so because in writing it as fiction, I'll be able to fill in the blanks.
yeah.
Hmm.
But I always love those fictions that it's like, oh, I could see this situation happening, right? Like having that real life experience to be in the
Yeah.
background of it.
It's going to be like based on a true story.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be excited. You'll have to keep me posted how you do that.
Okay. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So, what genres do you enjoy reading?
Oh, well, I like obviously memoir. I've read a lot of memoir over the last 10 years, just
Yeah.
just more of like mentorship and seeing how people delve into their vulnerability. But I also enjoy nonfiction, reading spiritual books and just regular fiction books like The Silent Patient and things that really have a great arc. And I love investigative journeys like things that dig deep
Yeah.
into discovery
Yeah.
and keep you on edge, like keep you turning the page. So a lot of fiction books that do that really inspire me.
Wonderful. Well, and how in your busyness do you find time to read?
Well, just I love reading, so I find time. I mostly read at night. And when I'm studying something that I'm using for writing or a writing book, I'll read it, for the day. But I go deep at night in a lot of books. I think that just keeps me up at night, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to read the same. Like books I really want to like dig into and pull stuff out of. I have to read during the day because my brain's like I would need something I can kind of like transport myself in the evening. It's tired by the
Yes.
end of the
Yes.
day. So,
Yeah. I think everybody has their own time clock. Yeah. What they
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think, well, are you a morning bird or a night owl? And I think that it just is when your brain is more, you can really synthesize information better, I think, based off that.
Yeah, see, I have a lot of energy, and one of the things this book did is help me focus my energy more toward like more focused. And it used to be just scattered all over the place where I was just a busybody and doing everything. And I think I really got intentional and disciplined about my time and about my focus on reading, studying, writing, because it was instead of getting an MFA, I just studied writing on my own. And I
Yeah.
studied several writing books and I read them over and over and over again. And that really inspired me, like understood that I'm not alone. All these things I'm going through, all these writers. And the one thing about writers is I realized you never arrive. You're never
Yeah.
like, I get it. I get all the rules of writing. I finally made it. You never do because writing is a constant challenge and every story presents new challenges and new depths to go into. So it's such a career of humbling career.
Yeah.
It's like you're always humbled by the next book and the next book and the next investigative journey. And I think that's beautiful because ego is out the door. There's never ego around any of it. It's more um of a journey of the heart and a journey of the mind of, you know, of curiosity. And the pen just flows with that.
Yeah. I love that. I am
Mhm.
not a writer at this stage in my life. So I love that reflection because I think I wouldn't imagine. Yeah, I can see what you're saying, right? Like you never arrive, right? You're always striving towards something with that. But the humbling
Always,
out process, that's beautiful.
yeah.
So, well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight with you today. Can you tell us a little bit about how you chose them?
Yes. So my books.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want me to talk
How
about?
did you pick them? Like, imagine you've read more than three books. So, how'd you pick these three
Hmm.
in particular?
I have to close my eyes and say which books impact me the most.
Okay.
When I read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, um, he it was a page turner, and I just thought, how did he do it? It was his first book.
Oh, I didn't
He
know
was not
that.
even on, he was not even on the platform.
Wow.
Yeah, he had no platform. He spent I think like 10 years writing it, like I've done this book,
Yeah.
Super Secret. And he had me at every chapter. I couldn't put it down. And the way he did it was he kept the suspense and he built the suspense as he went along. I mean, mine's a true story, so it's hard to do it exactly, but
Yeah.
he was, I studied his writing. I studied each sentence and I read it again and I highlighted it and you know, I marked pages that I thought were brilliant. And um, it's just one of my teachers. I look at the silent patient as a teacher.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, I love that you like picked it apart too. That's so cool.
Down. Yeah, I know.
Okay, so yep, so that was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Okay. All right. And then what's the next book you brought today?
The next book I want to talk about is called The Fact of a Body, and that blew me away. It was by Alex Marzano Lesnovich.
Okay.
Um, she was Croatian, like I am, ICH at the end, but she wrote an intellectual, emotional thriller about a murder mystery.
Okay.
And she and it was a memoir. It was like a true story.
Oh,
And she was an attorney that was doing a case. So like the housekeeper's secret, I was investigating Lee, but in turn, I found out the truth about me and my family. Well, she did the same thing. She was doing a case and she was defending a murder victim, a murderer,
yeah.
and the victim had died, and she was defending him, but she was going through deeply into why that guy murdered, right, this boy. And the whole process ended up going back to her journey and discovering what really happened in her childhood and
Wow.
the truth about herself and her family and what they all suppressed and said, told her never happened. And I just thought it was a fabulous braided memoir that spoke so loudly to me, and she had so much depth and details, and she had the story, like she had the investigative details, the DNA, the everything, unlike my story, that a lot of it was closed door, what happened. behind closed walls, and I had to write around what happened in the time periods of what happened to Lee. She really was in it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was another level of writing. I would highly recommend that book. It was
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I haven't heard of that one before, but I'm always on the lookout. I too have discovered memoirs in recent years, and so I'm always on the lookout for some good ones. So I'll have to check this
yeah.
one out. So that was The Fact of the Body by Alex
Mhm.
Marzano Lestinich.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. And then
It's
what's
good.
the last one you brought today?
The last one is The Alchemist.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yeah.
If I mean, okay, by Paulio Col Colho, I
Okay.
think it's how.
Coelho.
Okay,
I've heard Coelho
yeah,
too, but
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Hmm. Like Santiago takes a journey, and he basically is a discovery of wisdom. He goes through the essential wisdom of listening to our hearts and recognizing opportunities and learning from them, like the omens. It's sort of like the serendipitous signs I had while writing The Housekeeper's Secret. Things just fell in my lap in the perfect timing, and when I needed that information, and I was maybe just completely stuck.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stuckness going on, and then something would come and get me unstuck. It was like the alchemists had these omens that would come and guide them through life with wisdom, and it was all like metaphoric, but a beautiful analogy of how to find the seat of your soul.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It is such a great reflection on life, right? And I think it's one of those books that like you can learn from and apply it, but it's not necessarily told that way, which I think is so cool how he
Exactly.
does that.
Yes, he does. He takes you on a journey. Yeah. So those are my three books.
Wonderful. So that was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Coelho. I'll have to look that up and
Hmm.
be like, how do we say this?
Yeah, I know. I know.
So,
Yeah.
well, how I love to end our show here is with our bonus pairings, which are just a speed round of questions so you can answer these really quick. Are you a rereader?
Absolutely. I get more out of books the second and third time, to be honest. I got the story down the
Yeah.
first time and I read the story. Second and third time brings another level.
I'm gonna have to try
It's
it. I don't reread much because you understand motherhood right now at this stage is very busy.
yeah.
So my reading time is very short, but maybe I should try it and see if I get more out of it another reading.
Yeah, it's a good question though,
Yeah.
because I never, thought about it because it's something that I really enjoy but I don't do it back to back. I
Yeah.
take breaks between and then I read it again later when I'm questioning that whole concept again. I want to be able to own it,
Yeah.
because you really don't own it until you really digest it and can tell somebody else about it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
another time I could see where that would really help, like be able to do that. So,
Yeah,
what is one
exactly.
book you've read that has changed your life?
That I would say The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Yes, that is a great book.
It just begins, it walks you through the relationship with your thoughts and emotions and helping to uncover the source of your inner self. Like he really talks a lot about energy, and I'm an energy person. I have a lot of energy. So I wanted to make sure my energy is, it focuses and dwells into the positivity of life.
Yeah. I think
And
everybody should read this book. It's very
I think it
important.
should be a requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish there was a class in like grade school for soul development or something, like something for kids to be aware of, like all the energy a child has and when they use it for good, what that does.
Yeah, that would be
Hmm.
really good. I guess we can kind of try to do that
Yeah.
as parents on the back end to
Yeah.
supplement.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. Yeah.
Where is your favorite place to read?
Well, I love reading on airplanes
Okay.
and trains.
Yeah.
I love it because I'm still moving.
Yeah.
And when I'm moving and I'm going somewhere, I tend to be like, there's no place I can go. I'm still journeying, but I'm reading in depthly. It just feels like a wild adventure, both on the outside and the inside.
Yeah. And you get to like
Other
pick
than,
the book. I always feel like that's the exciting, like, what am I going to bring on my trip with me? What book am I going to pick? And
yeah,
there's some excitement.
yeah,
Or if it gets different than like when I'm at home and I finish something, I'm like, okay, what am I going to read next? It's a different feeling behind it.
it is a different feeling. Plus, home always is like pulling you toward, oh, the dishes are piled up or laundry needs to be done. And there's that keeps gnawing at you and it never really gets done. So there's this sitting down and reading feels a little bit irresponsible.
Yeah.
Unless it's at night when everybody's asleep, it's perfect. I like doing that too.
Yeah.
I read at night.
And you've
Mhm.
checked off your to-do list, right? Like that's not gnawing at you either.
I know, exactly. It's like I can't do anything else now.
Yeah,
The kids are asleep or whatever.
absolutely. Well, lastly, what are you reading next?
My book club is reading The Housemaid by Frida
Yeah, okay.
McFadden. And I'm excited about that book because it's, kind of about a housemaid,
Yeah, I've been
like
seeing it
a
everywhere
housekeeper.
too. So hopefully it's a great one.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's really getting some traction. She's on her second or third book. I reached out to her to do a blurb. She was really busy. She's really a amazing writer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
I have that one on my TBR as well because I'm like, I keep seeing this one. And I feel like when I keep seeing something, it's like, okay, time to put it on my list for.
Yeah, yeah. She writes fiction, and I wanted to read her book just because it's like, well, mine's obviously nonfiction and it's true story, and I've got the housekeeper thing, and it's just kind of, I would like to read different stories about housekeepers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Thank you so much it's an honor to be here, really.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Sandra Schnakenburg, including her book flight of books that influenced her writing craft. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find more information about today's book flight or other books that we talked about. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.